Welcome back to CFO Weekly, where we're talking with financial leaders about how to build efficiency in their teams, create time for strategy, and ultimately get results. With your host, Megan Weiss. Let's jump right in.
Today, my guest is Larry Chillemi. Larry is the Chief Financial Officer for Grow West, an agriculture retailer that services the northern Sacramento Valley and the North Coast. Grow West procures, stores, and resells chemistry and fertility products to growers and producers throughout these areas. Their growers buy their products to help them grow and/or maintain tree nuts, grapes, rice, tomatoes, stone fruit, melons, and many other fruits and vegetables that the world consumes daily. Larry is currently on the foundation board for United Cerebral Palsy of Sacramento and Northern California. He previously served as board chair for the First Tee of Greater Sacramento and as the board president for Financial Executives International, FEI. Larry has lived most of his life in the Sacramento area. He and his wife, Lee, have 2 married daughters and 4 wonderful grandchildren. They enjoy houseboating, water skiing, river walks, and anything else involving water. Larry and Lee also enjoy comfort biking, especially electric bikes, hiking, reading, vacations, and spending as much time as possible with their immediate family. Larry, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Megan. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to our discussion today regarding building high-performing teams and then equipping them with the right technology. Technology and people, they're both such critical components to the evolution of accounting, from backward looking to forward thinking, and I'm excited to get started. So let's jump in. First, tell me about your career progression and how you got to where you are today.
Excellent. Thank you again, Megan. Yeah, so I'm 62 years old, so it goes back a little ways. Back in 1975, I got a job working in the rafting industry. So we rented rafts for individuals and groups on the lower American River here in Sacramento. And so started there in high school, and I was there for around 13 years.
Wow.
During that time, I graduated from college and also got married, and we had 2 children. So during that first summer of 75 was a partnership. 2 guys, and I was their first non-friend employee. So when I walked in there, and I said, "Hey, you guys looking for an employee?" They said, "Well, we're not sure. We've never hired one before." So it was kind of a fun little beginning to business. At the age of 16, I was given some responsibility, and so that was a learning curve for me in the world of business. I worked there during the summers until about 1980, and then when I started there full-time, I started college seriously in September of 79, and that's when my first daughter was born. And then I graduated in 1983 when my second daughter was born. So during all that time, went from a part-time position to a full-time. I started there basically as a rafting manager. And then when I graduated from college, I made an employment proposal, and moving from basically the rafting manager position to VP of operations. And they accepted the proposal. It was a husband and wife team that were running the business at the time. And we had a great run at helping that business grow. So 5 years later, in March of 1988, was a turning point when I decided to make a change. The CPA that was working for our firm knew the CEO at Interstate Oil Company, and I was hired there in June of 88 as their controller. So I stayed with Interstate for 25 years, and Interstate Oil is a fuel and lubricant distributor with locations throughout California and northern Nevada. That was a big turn for me. It was exciting. I went into an office where I had more people that reported to me, so I was a little green behind the ears. During that time, we converted a couple of ERP systems, some hardware conversions. I helped them implement an inventory system. We worked through 6 acquisitions. I wore a number of hats during that time as being part of a family-owned company. After 12 years there, I became their CFO, and we did a number of different jobs there. I removed and replaced some underground fuel storage tanks, helped build a card lock. But most of my time was just basically developing a team with an office manager, IT, financial analyst, and ERP system analyst. So that was kind of a fun process for me to learn as I went through there. So after those 12 years, I moved on in February of 2013 to Grow West, where I am today. Been here about 8 years. Agriculture is our business. We do the same thing. We procure, store, and resell product mostly to the end user, growers, who grow all different kinds of food, rice and tree nuts, tomatoes, grapes, pears, all different kinds of varieties. And it's funny, Sacramento was where I've been most of my life, and I've known about agriculture, but once you get involved, you kind of realize how sophisticated it really is, and how these growers are very temperamental to how they grow their product, and can be kind of tough because Mother Nature is not very nice sometimes. And so you got to just be resilient and have thick skin. We have actually similar customers. So it was a nice transition from Interstate Oil to Grow West. And I've been able to learn about nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, the key ingredients to growing plants. And so that's been the exciting part of the process. So there's kind of it in a nutshell, real quick about my career progression.
Yeah, it sounds like you've had some amazing experience.
Yes, I have. Thank you.
Are there any particular stories or career moves that stand out in your mind as real turning points in your career?
Yeah, I would say so. There's a couple things here. First of all, going back to the rafting days, that time, first time I took cash from a customer, that was like really cool. I said, hey, this is something I want to do more, and also providing a service. At the time, people would get there and are excited for their day to go down the river and enjoy themselves and come back and want to go again. And so it was mostly a full day thing that you would do as far as renting a raft. But the idea of taking that cash and the transaction and everything about that was providing a service was really cool. So I was ingrained into business from very young. The other part too was going into college and taking an accounting 1A course and realizing that the debit credit system, it just related to me. Mm-hmm. I got it. I understood it. I said, hey, I get this. And then there's obviously a lot more to it, depending on how sophisticated you want to get with accounting. But that's where I learned that, hey, this is what I want to do. I think also too, I mentioned earlier about the employment proposal in the rafting business. I learned how to draw up proposals in college. And when I presented that proposal, it was a turning point for me because I basically asked for a new position and laid out the reasons why and said, here's what I can do. And so that was kind of a turning point for me because they said yes. And if they hadn't, I would have gone a different route. So that was kind of a fun whole energetic process to go through. Knowing the CPA there after the 5 years was getting to 1988. So again, knowing somebody and having connections is really what part of being any kind of person who wants a career needs to work on. So knowing that CPA who said, hey, I know somebody else was kind of a turning point for me. Again, I mentioned about being green behind the ears, walking in there thinking that I'll be able just to handle this just fine and basically going, oh no, what did I get into? And so those type of things make you kind of, they humble you a little more and take you down a step. And I think those are good sometimes.
Absolutely.
And part of it too was after I'd been there a couple of days, through the interview process, they had failed to mention that we were converting to a new computer system. So after a couple of days, I noticed a couple of the ladies were staying late. I said, hey, what's going on? And they said, well, we're converting to a new computer system. And I go, oh, okay. Do you need any help? They said, no. And then eventually they did, and we worked as a team, and when we converted it. So that was kind of a turning point for me, realizing that not only do I have a new staff, but we're converting a computer system, which I had not done before. So That was kind of it.
Trial by fire.
Exactly. Oh, yeah. And so you kind of learn those things, and they stay with you. Fortunately, most of the time, things stay status quo, but there are things that come into play. I think turning points too with acquisitions, each one's a little different. And, we ran through 6 of them while I was there at Interstate Oil. And then the part about leaving. And so again, I left there in 2013. So before that, about 3 years before that, I joined a financial group I became part of a nonprofit board, the first T of Greater Sacramento. I joined Vistage, and those things really helped me to become a better person, a better interviewee, a better manager of people. And I think those are some turning points about being involved, getting to know the group. And that's what really, when I say the group, I mean my peers and some service providers that are out there, and recruiters. And that really helped me as a turning point to move on in my career to Grow West.
Yeah, it's funny you mention your accounting 101 class, because that was my exact same experience. I took accounting and it just clicked for me, and I noticed it wasn't clicking for too many other people. So yeah, that's funny how that works out.
Exactly. And I still use T accounts today. When I'm trying to figure out, okay, what's going on with this particular transaction, because we got a new idea. It's just the way I'm more of a visual person. So when I put those T accounts up there on the whiteboard, it helps me. So that goes back to that initial time I saw that.
Yeah. And speaking of T accounts, so how do you think the role of a CFO has expanded and evolved over the last decade?
Yeah, that's I can only speak from private companies, so because that's all I've worked for my whole life. I've mostly worked for family companies. And so there's kind of I kind of lean that way a little bit from what I've learned. But basically, I know that this role, titles and responsibilities of those working, for you, your direct reports, that's kind of changed a little bit. Going back to Financial Executives International, the group I belong to still today. I've been there involved in over 10 years. And, initially that group was only basically, C-level individuals. And today it's just really grown into a much more expanded set of titles. And I think that's happening in our world too. I think there's a little more specialization. I think not as much in, where maybe in the private world, but it can be. But I think that specialization is definitely going to be more key going down the road. I think we'll always have our AP, accounts payable, accounts receivable, and credit and all those fun things, which will never go away. But there are some specialties that go along as I move, especially with technology. The common phrase of getting more done with less people has been around for a long time. And so how do you manage that? I mean, the goal isn't, to try and get rid of people. It's more of how can you get more done? So I think that's what CFOs really need to look at going forward, because we need to balance that need to grow with also getting employees to be efficient. So I think that piece is constantly evolving. Relationships with CPA firms, I think, are key. I think I look to our firm for a lot of help. I'm not a tax accountant at all, so there's a lot that goes on there in making some decisions. And so I think that some CFOs do have that. And so, where is that relationship? Because CPA firms have definitely evolved on their own too, about how they help other companies. And so that piece I think will always be going along. There's words that we use like strategic, networking, working closely with information technology. There's reporting and analytics. There's a big thing with database management that's been going on for a while. It's going to continue. And then I think too, really the one thing that is so important is working with the cloud and what that means in our world. I use software here for our budgeting that's all in the cloud. And then we also have, on the other side of it, we have our ERP system that's on premise. So it's kind of a whole different animal there. I think CFOs have different roles with different companies. I think in belonging to Financial Executives International, I have found that no two CFOs are exactly alike as far as where their responsibilities start and end. Banking, I think that we run 4 different companies out of this office that we administer, and we have 2 banks, and we'd like to keep it that way. It's always good to have more than one lender in the industry. Yep. And I think that that's going to be something that is constantly working. Lower interest rates today, what does that mean for CFOs? I talked about the cloud, software as a service versus on-premise. But the other day I heard also this thing called the Chief Cloud Officer. I read about it. And basically it's, hey, you're sitting there, you're working with Office 365, I work with Adaptive Insights, Adaptive adaptive planning, and there's fees on a monthly basis or an annual basis. And so, does the CFO handle that, or is there another person that does? So, because basically they call them, from what I read, it's called the cloud economists. This was a gal named Rainey Johnson with SolarWinds. And so I thought that was interesting about how, where are we going with that piece? Cash management, electronic workflows, as opposed to more manual, is definitely going to be something that's going to evolve. And then I think, not the final thing, but definitely one of the more important things is how you work with your CEO and the rest of your leadership team. Are you guys a good fit?
Yeah, it's especially now that the CFO role is becoming so much more strategic these days.
It is. I mean, that's a key word. And I think there's no place where in my opinion, in a business workflow where the CFO may have some influence. I'm not saying that, they have to control it, but they definitely can have an offer of how they can see something move through the system.
So today we're talking about high-performing teams. So what does it mean to you to be a high-performing team?
Yeah, so I think the first thing I got to say here is another thing that I say here is my doing. I've read a lot. I've listened on webinars, networking, talking with people. So a lot of the stuff here I'm regurgitating, but it's stuff that I feel of all, as you filter through everything, is what I think works. So, the process really of working with, starting with your customer, your vendor, and your employees, and how you basically take $1 from the beginning and move it through the system and get that $1 back, hopefully a little more. So that really is, to me, that's what the team has to do. And there's a lot of moving parts there depending on your company. And I think, in the book, Good to Great, like Jim Collins said, get the right people on the bus. Okay, I can't think of any other very concise phrase that talks about that. And it's not easy to do. You're going to get some pushback, especially if you come into a company, if that's from outside as opposed to being hired from within. There's an emotional intelligence that is talked about, emotional quotient, the ability to understand, use, and manage your own emotions. I think it's so important because not everybody is good at that. And so we all have our highs and lows, but how do you maintain a kind of a steady emotional intelligence? And I think that's important for building a good team. You got to make sure those team members are like that. People are still going to get upset or frustrated. And so what do you do during those times? We use also personality profiles. I've done a couple of them on myself to find out where are my weaknesses, where are my strengths, who are people that I relate to the best, who do I have challenges with, because we're all going to have that. So to me, personality profiles are so important in hiring. And also as you work through annual reviews, quarterly reviews, one-on-ones, whatever you might do there, I think those are very important.
So which ones do you like? Which one of those personality tests?
Well, I think they all offer something a little different, right? You got the one that has the quadrants and where are you, like right, left, top, bottom type thing. Yeah. There's DISC. We use one that's called ProScan. There's other ones that I've used through Vistage that I've done through our meetings there. And so they all offer something else that kind of explains who you are. And I think the key here is that not just to trust one of them, but to do a couple of different ones. And there's another one that we use here, the gentleman in Sacramento, is called 34 Strong. And he does a great job with looking at your personality a little differently. And so I think you got to find one that works with your culture. Yeah. And then take it from there.
Yeah, I know one of our clients uses a cultural index survey and they swear by it.
Gotcha. I think those are all great things. I think it helps you with finding people with the skill sets, how well they adapt. Not everybody's innovative, so you got to find those that are willing to, react to innovation and those that can actually do innovation, very important. And I think everything else is communication. Megan, I think that we cannot stress enough that we don't communicate consistently, and I'm just as guilty of it. And so you just got to get better at that. So I think too, one of the main things about high performance teams is that I saw this quote this morning. It says, "A person who feels appreciated will always do more than what is expected." And so how do you show that appreciation to people that deserve it? And that's really what helps build a team.
Yeah. So do you have any tips for showing appreciation?
Yeah. So I think the one-on-one concept or the huddles, whatever you do to either relate to someone or a group together, whether you're in, you call the person, out with everybody there, and calling them out in a good way, but with that appreciation, or you sit down and say, okay, where are we going today? Explain to me where your stress points are. Where's your priorities? Do we get that? How do we get that set up? And then during that conversation, pointing out things they've done well. And also too, I think I have a tendency to, I'll go out and just get a blank card and I'll write something in there about whatever they did and say, you're appreciated, thank you, blah, 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 whatever it might be. And, give that to them. So when they walk in the door, it's sitting on their desk and it's available to them. So I've done that quite a few times. And I think that the more you can talk to people about where they're going right, as opposed to, why they did something wrong, and try and get them involved to make decisions. I think, I truly believe in delegation. And I think the more you delegate to someone that deserves it and understands it and can run with it. So you got to find that right person again. All right. Because not everybody wants to do that. There are those people that just want to do a job. Give me something, give me my list, let me do it, and I'll go home. And there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. So they feel appreciated too when you can make that happen. So I think it's more about that communication piece, just talking and relating to them as a business professional.
Yeah, especially these days when the world can seem so disconnected and impersonal with emails and texts and everything else. It's easy to forget how to actually communicate with people.
Very good point. I mean, it's so easy for us to just send an email, and there are times I'll sit there and start typing a couple of sentences and go, you know what, this is going to need a conversation, face to face or a phone, whatever it might be, and so sometimes you get a little carried away with that because it is easy just to send an email and move on. So very good point.
So do you have any tips for how we can sustain high-performing teams in a remote environment now that we're all, or most of us, are working outside the office?
Yeah, so I think clear goals. I think that this is key. I think I mentioned about the one-on-ones, communicating with your direct reports. I think technology is going to be an effective technology. Just to get something to get it is not always the right answer. That communication piece, I think, is very important. Also, too, I think the right amount of direct reports. I think, what is that number? It's different for everybody as a leader. And so, what is that? What does that mean? Is that direct report local or not? We've had a credit manager in our company that has always worked from home. So I've been here 8 years and she was working from home before that, and it's worked just fine. So she communicates with everybody out there, all of our sales staff, all of our managers of our locations, anybody that needs to talk with her. So that works just fine. So, but it's been something we've been doing for a while. So how do you take a position in a company and all of a sudden make it a work from home? We've struggled with that a little bit here. Honestly, through this COVID crisis, 70% of our office is still here. Staff is still here and has worked through these past however many months it's been. And I think we had to get past the anxiety and are we going to hurt each other and all that. But I think you find out that some tasks work really well and you find out some that don't. And the reason why is you haven't worked on your process well enough. Yeah. And so to me, when you think about workflows and you're discussing and creating and implementing, and then on top of that, you start over again, improving, so I think that needs to constantly work with this working from home and remotely. I think it has a place. I'm not sure where it ends. I still feel that there are customers that want to walk in the door and see you. And we have a couple of customers that walk in here and pay their bill. They're old farmers that have been doing that for years. And, if if nobody worked in this office, I think they wouldn't like that. So you've got to be able to, and again, they're the minority. Okay, most of the people don't mind doing things electronically, but you got to think about all those things. So I think in some people it is, because I did have some quarantine time myself because I was doing some traveling when COVID kind of hit, and it was an interesting change for me. I was always working in an office, so that part is very familiar to me. And I miss being around people and talking to them. Even though you don't talk a lot, it's still, you see people, say hello, walk by. Those things are kind of, I think that it's, some people don't want to do that and it works fine. Other ones still need that kind of thing to make them feel good about what they do.
Yeah, definitely true. Some people struggle with the work from home environment and not being able to socialize and see people and get those cues that they normally receive in an office.
I agree. And I think, with this high-performing teams and even talking about it remotely, the thing that, I guess a phrase that I've read before is what's called the continuous close mentality. Mm-hmm. So if you're always, as far as thinking about the books, whatever that means to somebody, what are we doing to constantly think about how we can close more quickly? And so we can get numbers out the door, or whatever it is you do at the beginning of a new month, showing the numbers from last month. I know some things are done, mostly from the sales side about what happened yesterday or what happened last week. I mean, that's kind of a different story, but I'm talking about that continuous close, doing journal entries beforehand. What can you do? What can you reconcile earlier? What can you do daily? And I think those are the things that high-performing teams do in the, quote, accounting office. And I think that can still be done remotely. I don't know how there are companies that have, a lot of entries in bank accounts. There's no reason why that can't be done daily. Now, can you move that to a complete electronic move? So I think those are things that are important. Cash flow, a little trickier on the sense of, money coming in. I think that a lot of times right now we are built on the fact that we send out statements, so they send checks to us. We do some electronic ACHs and funds coming into us, but there's a lot of checks that still come in the door. So we would have to change that in our world. So how do you do that? And how do you inform your customer? Is the customer going to like it? And so I think those things about remotely are really drawn around what's your customer going to feel? How's the customer going to feel? How is your vendor going to feel? And how your fellow employees are going to take all that information. So I think it's a work in progress. Yeah. And I think it has to come from the top down. The top down, the CEO, chairman, wherever that person is, has to want that to make happen also.
Great points. And you touched on this just a bit, but technology obviously plays an important role in helping to make the accounting function more effective and efficient. But it requires more than just an initial investment and then kind of forgetting about it. So how do we get the most out of our technology?
Yeah, so I'll start off with what I finished up with in my comment there earlier about it's got to come from the top down. I mean, and, sometimes that has a bad connotation because a lot of companies want to work from the bottom up. So basically, that means giving people the ability to give their opinions and be heard. And there's nothing wrong with that. Also, trying to get others to lead. But for technology to move along in a company, it has to come from the top. And as an example, we had decided here to try and use SharePoint. I don't know if you or any of your listeners have used SharePoint before, but we were saying we wanted to find a way to have some file storage away from our current database and sharing company documents and those type of things. And, SharePoint, really is not it's part of Office 365, but really it's an intranet, and really it's a communication with your employees and leaders. But you also need someone who understands it and can constantly update it, because otherwise it can get dry and not used. And we weren't ready for that. We didn't have anybody in place to do that. And so we invested some money that really didn't go anywhere. And I think now, this was about 3 years ago, but now today we have our intranet. and it's working through SharePoint. And so we're kind of going, hey, this is working really nice, but we've got somebody dedicated. So that's where I think technology, to get the most out of it, you've got to have that CEO, chairperson, whatever that might be, to say, let's move on, let's get going on this. And I think that really the key here about getting the most out of technology is, what does the customer want? What's the right platform for our industry to help that customer? We have to look at the customer as the center of the pie and say, how do we make everything else work for that customer? And because not all customers want, state-of-the-art, cutting-edge technology. I think too, after you get that understood, is what metrics do you need in reporting? Can you easily just create an Excel document that gives you what you want, or do you need something that's more, on the spot, saying what happened yesterday or this afternoon or whatever the case may be? And I think too, us going back to getting that team approach, the right team, getting employees engaged. Are they happy about it? Where is that going? And I think that's going to get the most out of your technology, and finding people, getting the right people on the bus that want to really utilize that technology and aren't scared of the change that it's going to bring.
Yeah, that's great advice, especially putting the customer at the center, whether that customer is internal or external. You got to give your customer what they want.
Agreed, completely.
Yeah, I think a lot of people put in bells and whistles, and they're just sometimes not necessary.
That's a good point. I think it's the software vendor's job to sell their product.
Yeah, absolutely.
And sometimes, what they say it can do, you're kind of going, oh, that's really cool. But is it really going to help you? Right? So it's one of those things.
So how do you think technology, when done correctly, will help shape the future of accounting?
I think it's limitless. I think it's endless. I think that there's the one word I would use as a key is workflow. So first of all, is the company interested in workflow? Is that a top-down thing? Is that a CFO or whoever has that particular title in the company? Is that something that they're interested in doing? Because it constantly takes looking after, is probably the right word to use. I don't feel technology would completely replace all of accounting, but I think it can take care of most of it. But I still think, because we still need to, enter information, we need to calculate, we need to verify, be forensic in some cases, discussing and managing the numbers. I don't see how technology is going to ever erase, you and I just sitting here talking about accounting and what that means and what numbers we got and the results we got and who needs to know. I think that there's still that piece in it. And no matter what, I think that there's going to be the gut decision sometimes, no matter how many facts you have. Sometimes it still comes down to a gut decision. But I think that technology can help get you the answers quicker. Like we talked about the continuous close. We talked about, sitting down and saying, well, how does this piece of paper move through this company? And now how do we do that electronically? And I think that can be done. I definitely do. And, I think we haven't touched on it very much, but the antivirus world and that piece of information going out the door, how do we make sure that we keep that secure? That's never going away. And that's going to get tougher and tougher. And I think too, shaping the future of accounting depends on how fast your customers want to see that. Are you going beyond what they need? And so again, it's one of those company things. And I think that if you can introduce it to a customer, that this is what we'd like to do, and here's how it's going to affect you, and how does it affect your vendors, the people that you're paying, what does that look like? And even to the point of employees. So, right now we outsource our payroll software as a service, and it works great. So, but we had to get people up to speed on that. And so I think that as long as those three key ingredients you have there of your business, your customers, your vendors, and your employees, they will help you shape where your technology is going for accounting. And again, staying connected at all levels of the workflow, and helping and keeping your customer is key.
I think so many of us fear technology because, we think someday it's going to replace our jobs, but I think really it's just giving us a chance to move up the value chain and add more value to the companies we work for.
Yes, very good point. I think that value piece is very strong. I don't know. I know, and again, I keep talking about it varies between companies. And I think that's what makes our country great, is the fact that we can be a little different in a lot of ways. And I think that's good for us.
Yep, I totally agree. Larry, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Megan. This was, I was a little nervous in the beginning, to be honest, but I think this turned out really well. It was a great conversation, and I appreciate you giving me the time to talk about all these different questions.
Yeah, so I've really enjoyed hearing your story and your advice on getting the most out of our teams and our technology. And for all of our listeners today, I hope you've enjoyed today's discussion as well, and I hope you'll tune in next week. Until then, take care of yourselves and have a great week.
If you're ready to boost efficiency and streamline your accounting processes at significant cost savings, it's time to talk with Personiv. Their people-powered solutions have transformed the delivery of back-office tasks and general accounting functions for decades, partnering with clients to provide everything from accounts payable to payroll services. See what Personiv can do for you by visiting personiv.com.
You've been listening to CFO Weekly, presented by Personiv. Please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts to hear all of our episodes. Want to learn more? Check out personiv.com. Thanks for listening.